Kia ora everyone. I just wanted to do a quick screencast sharing some thoughts on how you may use Google Spaces a bit differently. And it's not saying or suggesting that there's a right and a wrong way. I suppose it's that those who are looking for a bit more than the one channel or the one space, the one stream, how you may think about spaces a bit differently, especially those who've been using Mattermost and Discord, etc. So I'm going to go to a dummy account I've set up, student account I've set up for this, and we should be able to see that now. And over on the right hand side here, I've got Discord. This is what my course for last year. And since, as I've shown before, Mattermost and Discord operates on basically a channel, a series of channels that are accessed on the left hand side, a bit like Google Plus Communities used to have categories on the left hand side. You have channels. So you basically set up channels that represent different sorts of activity. So the town square here in Discord is the main channel as this sort of central general comms channel, like we use for the staff room in a way. And so that's how it's displayed and accessed on Discord. And then I've got various other channels I would go to, discussions, and there's little categories you can create as well. As you can see, there's quite a lot of channels, and students actually created their own channels, which is one of the great things about Discord and Mattermost, that they can do that sort of thing on various interests, which was really good, especially at the beginning of the year. Now, when we switch over to Google Spaces here, Google Spaces, we have been sort of using it as a single space, but in fact, that's not what Google's trying to do potentially or necessarily with this. It is they've set it up to operate in the same way that Teams does, the same way that Slack does, in some sense the same way that Discord and Mattermost does as well. So essentially, if you're for business, your business will have the Google Workspace, and within that have chat and spaces, which will various spaces will be created, and in essence, the spaces act as channels as you access them. So if I flip back to my NetNZ account here, you can see there's all these spaces here I just access. And if you're in a business of some kind, there'll be multiple spaces, but essentially they're channels. So if you look at this here, my work environment, this is my Discord environment here for philosophy, essentially the same. They operate as a stream where you share posts or create posts that will have communicate various text and share links and documents, etc. Same thing in here. And I suppose what I'm saying is rather than just stick to one space, which there's nothing wrong with, and Sue's been able to do that successfully, another way of thinking about it is setting up multiple spaces that essentially act as channels. Now, if you go to a student's view, now this is a student I've set up, and this is all they'll see. When they go to their Gmail account, it's very unlikely they're going to have spaces set up within their school they're going to be using actively within their school. It could be that there's a couple of courses that they're enrolled in, so there may be a few more spaces, which is fine. But in essence, what I've done is I've looked at my Discord server over here, and I've gone, okay, how would I set that up using spaces? If I imagine these are channels, and as a student, I'm accessing these channels. Obviously, I add or create a space and I add students to it each time. I do the same thing, in fact, in Discord. I create a channel, but I don't have to add them to it because they're automatically added to it. So it's one of the wee negatives, I suppose, but it's fairly easy. But I've set up fewer spaces because I think probably within a space there's a bit more room to do other things with threads and stuff. You can use threads in Discord as well, but the trick would be students having to directly reply. If they don't directly reply, so reply in thread, if they don't do that, then you're likely to very quickly get a stream of posts and you'll lose things. So I think in this, and actually in any sense of using Google Spaces, it's really important you get students to reply in thread if you've got a very active space. Doesn't matter so much with Discord because we've got so many channels that if students want to just basically post directly in there, it doesn't matter because I've got multiple channels, lots of them. But here, basically, I set up a town square, which essentially would be this sort of the general comms and the main sort of center. And then I've got a space for focused discussion. So, and if you look at Discord, I go over to Discord and philosophical discussion, you create threads in Discord here. So these threads pop out, and this is where the focused discussion would happen. Well, for philosophy and for other courses potentially, there's plenty of opportunity for discussion really. I've set up a space to access a channel. So we would create a thread for each discussion question. Students would just need to make sure they reply in thread. Otherwise, again, you'll get very quickly get a stream. So my students, if you look at Discord here, they very quickly got used to the idea of replying in thread. Many of them use Discord anyway, but if you really reinforce it early on, they'll quickly get the idea. And then I also had created a space for a cafe, as sort of off-topic threads that on discussions on interests, which are a very good idea, especially early on. So I was able to do something like I've got here. I've got multiple threads, multiple channels. Got one space, and then we would create threads that would represent different interest areas. Then I've got a channel or space for resources and sharing. And then we have a Monday check-in. So every week students check in. I post first and I share my how my weekend went and what's on top for me this week, and they do the same thing. They reply, and you can see it over here. Oops, not introduce yourself. Monday check-in. So you have these threads. The same thing will happen here. So I've just simplified it a bit more for spaces. I could easily create more spaces and students, and you can see basically, essentially, these are channels like you have over here. So the advantage of Discord and Mattermost is a self-contained environment, so you can have multiple channels and activities rather than just one long stream. But actually, Google Spaces is designed to operate in that, so the spaces are essentially like channels. And that's one way of setting up a course in Spaces, is to think about, okay, I don't necessarily need one space. You could always, of course, start with one space in the first week in particular as you get students in, and then create the other spaces. But just some thoughts on how you perhaps could set up spaces. Really what I did is looked at my Discord server. I thought long and hard and actually about using spaces. I will still use Discord unless we have major issues. I still see some advantages in it. However, I could easily use Google Spaces, and that's how I would use it. I would have to set up multiple spaces that act as channels, but I'm suggesting that's actually how it's meant to be used in a way anyway. There's no right and wrong way at all. It's just another way of looking at things. And so feel free to ask any questions. Hopefully we have plenty of sharing over the next wee while in terms of how we're using the various environments we're operating in. As I said, there's no right answer, so it'd be good to have lots of sharing going on.